I'm coming more from the program side. Myself, working as a principal technical program manager at Walmart. So the topic that I have today is digital PMOs. PMO stands for Program Management Office because sometimes it's misleading. There is product management, there is project management, program. So the topic that I cover primarily is digital PMOs. For because I'm coming from a retail background, what we'll talk how we can integrate the toolings that can help growing our performance from an execution stand. That's the primary topic. So overall, I got 20 plus years of experience in IT. Last 10 years, I'm working for Walmart, where I've been leading enterprise class 411 programs. It's uniquely complex, especially cross-functional, cross-team dependencies with strategic codes. So that's my primary. And I also focus on some of this PMO, specialized in PMO transformations, meaning we translate from the traditional PMOs to the digital PMOs, and also on the delivery excellence. These are my primary skill sets of experience. So, going to the before we get into the digital PMO topics, let's go deep dive into the traditional, like what are the key problems that we face in the traditional PMO space. So one is the fragmented status tracking. I'm sure like you mostly are from the technical side, but when you think about delivering projects, we do have the timelines and space, efforts. We always work on this aggressive timeline with cross-functional teams, which are located. So it's very hard when we actually need to report or give the status updates to the key stakeholders. When we have fragmented status tracking, that becomes a challenge because the data are inconsistent. Many times when you work on the not real-time data, data becomes stale and the report that we generate it doesn't really give the right picture. And we also look at the challenges in terms of limited dependencies, meaning we identify the risk late in the project phase. And as you are aware, especially in the sales cycle, when you identify risk the late phase, it becomes more expensive to mitigate them because they have already become blockers. And many times we end up in revising the timeline, which is not a desirable one. So there's other things. And inconsistent governance. Many times we don't have a common guideline across teams, especially when you work with cross-dependent teams, cross-functional teams. Each team have their own standards. They are not following a common goal, common play. Then it becomes very difficult to badge in terms of the quality or in terms of time to time how they perform. Inconsistent governance is another challenge that we typically see in the traditional PMO. All these factors contribute to the slow decision making because the leaders, when they need to work on the decisions, because the data that they have, it's one, they don't have a consolidated view. Many times it's stale. So we are forced to take decisions based on incomplete information. That also slows the decision making. So these are some of the key problems. And what I'm proposing here, which we already established, we were able to pilot it, could scale it, and as Walmart works at a large scale. So we were able to scale it at an larger organizations level. And we do see the benefits, and we'll go through some of this use case. So let's deep dive into what we could cover through. One is the digital PMO framework. It's nothing but it's a practical operating model which connects from strategy till the delivery into a single source of. Why that is critical? The moment you have a single source of record, then you can layer on top of it. Even you can bring AI, which can automate some of these manual stuff, manual tasks that currently, which is mostly mundane tasks, where the DPMs are focusing on tactical, non strategics. This helps for by reducing this manual efforts. We could redirect those efforts that we are reducing to more tactical and strategic. As part of that, we'll discuss on a Jira Confluence, which many of you might be using in your day-to-day activities. How we can integrate these tools to come up with this unified system. As part of the exploratory case study, which I did piloted in one of the portfolio that I manage, which we typically have close to 20 plus teams that we connect as part of this portfolio. And on a quarter to quarter, we usually manage 50 plus initiatives within this portfolio. And finally, review some of the outcomes and results as part of implementing this framework. So, as I mentioned, this framework is basically unifies various layers, starting from the strategy to the delivery execution, single code. And if you see this layer, the governance and insight, which is actually overarching in all the phases. We start from this core strategy. That's where the business and product comes up with the strategic themes based on the leadership alignment, that what we want to in this short term, long term, or only in an LRP long range, which gets converted into GPX capabilities of initiatives, which is more on the execution layer. So as you saw, like in governance and insights, it basically helps in identifying the risks early in the phase so that we can surface them before it becomes problems and impacting the timeline and efforts. And which also helps in having an executive reporting, which is more an automated, so that it doesn't become stale and we can always have the consolidated, which is a real time. So that's primarily the framework. And again, if you go further, what are the core components within this framework? We start with the strategic themes, which is more of the business requirements, which converts into PRD, which goes to the next phase, which is converting them to the initiatives or epics or capabilities. And OKS is nothing objectives, key results, and rates that we want to track, which feeds into the delivery telemetry. Basically, we feed this live data from Jira, which can help in tracking the velocity, project velocity, what the blockers, the status, efforts. This becomes more of a live instead of going through this manual, traditional, offline mechanisms. Going further, so we'll talk more about Jira and Confluence. And like both are Atlassian products, tightly plugged in. They have core features that help us in integrating it very seamlessly. So Jira, as you're aware, like it's more on the tickets where we can track whether it is a bug or whether they're epics. We create them in the Jira, and there are macros which are integrated in Confluence where we can pull this data directly from Jira. So Confluence, we talk more on the governance layer, use visual that I showed, where we can help in creating standardized governance templates. And that could be in any phase, starting from the planning. You can have planning templates, yearly templates, project plan. So having a standardized template helps in reducing, reinventing the effort so that team can focus more on the execution rather than reinventing something which already exists. Like the key thing in the governance, having a centralized intake process, because when the inputs comes from various places, we run into this manual prioritization, ad hoc prioritization, which slows down the decisions, slow down the overall process. And I create portfolio level dashboards. Now, instead of this manual Excel-based dashboards, we can create dashboards which are based on like Jira data, which also can be reused across teams, which helps in accelerating the timelines as well as getting real-time states, which helps in making informed decisions for the event. And it also helps in auditability. Once we have a standardized template, we have a governance in place, it becomes easy for us to do an auditing and do a hygiene health check and ensure that these data are actually in a group. These data are maintained and they're having the latest. If you go to the delivery execution layer, that's where we leverage Jira. So typically, as you guys are aware, like many of you might be using checking your individual deliverables. So first thing that we need to start is actually define a common guidelines in terms of how these fields are mapped. What is the definition? So that we have a common definition in terms of the fields that we use, so that we all talk the common language when we talk between different teams. We have same level of understanding. Yeah. Basically, we start creating a page to track the initiatives or the capabilities which have different fields. Some of the key fields that we define as part of that meta model mapping. We use components to identify or list the cross team dependency. And based on these components that we define, we have automated jobs that we create subtasks within that epics, which can be used to track the planning in terms of their size commitment. Even we can link the epics, engineering epics to this overall planning epic. The same epic will be same epic which we created during the planning phase. We'll be using during the execution phase. So there is logging of decision, the status. We can always go back and identify. There's a common single repository, which helps, as I mentioned, real-time delivery telemetry because we are using a live Jira data. So key thing that we need to ensure we have a common guideline, we keep them updated so that we need to ensure there's an auditing, there's a hygiene check based on the guidance that we need. And we also use existing fields within Jira like the blockers, where we define the risk paths to agree. So in nutshell, we use Epi as the source of truth in terms of the efforts, the status, the risk, in terms of the decision. Jira Epic becomes our source of truth. And on top of that, we can layer what we need. We can create whatever the reporting view. We can automate them by using AI. We can, because we are getting to the next phase. Once we create this Epic for defining a capability, but we can create AI agents, which even defines the PRT. And that's the next level. And it can also help in defining even the dependent teams. If we are working with a new product, a new engineering team, they may not have the history of the past knowledge. So they can always run on these AI agents to identify some of this. So, summary, like whether these tools, we could eliminate minor status reporting, and we can give leaders a single or this current view of portfolio. So some of these are the enablers which you already saw in the previous one. We have standardized templates, centralized intake, which is very key. We should have a single channel of capturing the intake so that we don't have each various channels. We have this fragment. Right. Build portfolio dashboards, build the auditability so that every decision status escalation is logged in one place. And then briefly plans on one of the pilot, and those pilots actually leading this particular portfolio, which is automotive. And this is one of the most operationally complex portfolio in the Walmart. The reason being it's truly omni. It has got an e-com online piece. It has got a supply chain. It has also got an in-store. Because what you do in automotive care center as a customer, you can purchase auto items, tire, anything that is related to all. And you can even book appointments. Purchase a tire, I go to a Walmart store. I can do these installations. I can do the oil change. So I start the journey online, then I convert, I fulfill the services in store. And their omni channels are covered as part of this. So typically the teams that we need to involve in actually building capabilities in the state of 20 profitable team that we need to be involved in each. And roughly we work for close to 50 initiatives every quarter. So okay, and the number of teams, and things that we need to track on. So as part of implementing this pilot digital framework, within 6 months of a deployment since the inception, and the initial 6 months, we could get 30% reduction in terms of PPMs that we had allocated for this spot. So we started 8 when we started this pilot, and then the was to a like span of 12, 1 year, we could reduce that PPMs that was supporting this portfolio. But followed here is not on the reduction of the headcount. Objective was not to reduce the headcount, but instead reduce the manual effort so that post manual ad hoc efforts, those TPMs, they can channelize towards more strategic and tactical rather than working on something else. So again, from an operational, we work from manual, more for automatic, and just report and spreadsheet updates to live generator feeds. We become more reactive rather than reactive because we were surfacing the risk much earlier in the phase of the project. We are identifying those dependencies, and from fragmented, we get more unified. For example, we have a single source system of record. So we are having this essence of fragmented tracking. And again, these are some of the numbers that we identified as one of this point. As I mentioned, first 6 months, we were achieving 30% effort reduction. And in the next 6 months, where we were getting more mature and the adoptions are getting more big, they go see another additional 30%. So overall, when we started at 8, and we ended this pilot after 2 months, then we had 3 PMs, the same level of velocity. We're still managing the same initiatives, still manage it with less number of PMs. From a stakeholder impact, we have much improved transparency because stakeholders go to this. They can always pull the real-time portfolio status view without going through these manual. From a decision perspective, we could faster trade-off decisions. In real-time, dependencies are identified. Risk data is identified much earlier. So we could make informed decisions much faster, which we used to take weeks earlier, which we could do it in days. Okay. And it also helped in improving the confidence in terms of the report. Executive reporting shifted more towards live dashboard reviews rather than doing some manual tags that we have completed on our help business. So just to summarize, the key takeaways, whether you work on a traditional, which are the areas that you work, some of these things that you can always implement in your area will definitely benefit your organization. Well, what are the tools that you use? We talked about Jira and Confluence. You might be using a different tool, but the moment you integrate your tools, they can work seamlessly. It helps in eliminating this manual hand. Then try to standardize the governance, like having a common guidelines, common templates, having common dashboards helps in actually creating the consistency. Then you can do the comparisons in terms of operations in terms of health status, and it increases the predictability on the predictability at scalable. It also increases the visibility or communication when you use know the data is real time. You start give it's actually in Jira, where we can create dash with the net. So you not really want a code planning. And always connect strategy to the delivery so that you don't work inside. When you actually work with the business, the final outcome that we want delivering, it should be aligned to what business initially. Many times we work in silos, and when we do the final testing, we are no, this is not what the business wants. And then we work with efficiency. But at a very high level, it's wonderful.